My name is Jussi Schütte. I'm from Transylvania, Romania. I grew up there during communism, and I'm here with my good friend Joe. We are here mostly to talk about his life, but just kind of an introduction. I wrote a book about my life under communist Romania from 1972 to 1990, and this is the book I tried. And Joe read the book, and it really stirred a lot of memories from his life, and he really wanted to talk to me about his life. So this video I'm doing is not about me, it's about Joe. And with that, let's start, Joe. Go ahead. I'm listening.
Jussi, how shall I go back when I was born and what happened to me in Hungary, or you want to continue when I already arrived to North America?
Well, I think that we should start with you talking to us about your parents, maybe your childhood, and then how you grew up in Hungary, what you have done, the revolution, and then maybe in another segment after we are done with this, then we can switch to the United States.
Well, a rather interesting life, because I was born 9 years before the Second World War started in Europe, and then so I went through the pre-war era when all the Germans, Hungarians were militarized, and eventually, as a little boy, I was in awe seeing that all kinds of military equipment, particularly aeroplanes, which I was very much fascinated with. And very
this was
early
in Sopron, or where was it?
Sopron. Sopron is...
So which year were you born? 32?
1931.
31. So my father was born in 1934. My mother was born in 1932.
Yeah.
So you're about the age of my parents.
Yeah. And anyway, the Second World War, for a young boy and living through, I hope nobody will be subjected to such a incredible tragedy, seeing people dropping left and right, destroying my lovely cities in area compartments, and I felt guilty that how come I did not get killed. And that feeling is probably not very natural, because everybody wants to live, but the reason I'm mentioning it, because I felt guilty that I survived.
As a child, you already felt guilt for that. As a child, you already felt guilt for that.
Yes. And anyway, the war ended in 1945.
Excuse me, did you have any friends or relatives who were lost in the war?
Well, my relatives survived, including my own father, who we didn't know what happened to him after the war. He was captured by the Russians and ended up in Kuibyshev in Siberia, and spent 5 years when they finally sent him home to Hungary. 96 pounds, man, no hair, no teeth, very nervous. Anyway, he died shortly after of his injuries. In the same time...
Did he tell you any stories about his imprisonment in Siberia?
Well, yes and no. Only thing he used to say, which eventually President Reagan used to say as well, it was an evil empire. And it was not only Solzhenitsyn, who was a Russian officer, wrote down what happened in Siberia by the Russians.
In the Gulag archipelago.
Yes. And then...
keep talking, Joe, keep talking.
What happened in the same time, I was studying, luckily, because my mother, living with my mother alone, with my brother, a year younger than I am at that time. And I was managed to finish in a good grade in elementary school, so I was able to get into high school, which we call gymnasium.
In Sopron?
In Sopron. Sopron is an interesting city because after the First World War, when Hungary was truncated and we lost 2/3 of our territories in Hungary, Sopron also was annexed to Austria. And then the university students in Sopron, erdőmérnöki és gépészmérnöki szak.
So that's the forestry and then mechanical.
Yes, mining engineering as well. They made a demonstration, and luckily the occupying officer was an Italian general. Interestingly, Italy in the First World War was on the British side, and he managed to left listening to the university students and annexed Sopron back to Hungary. If you look at the map, Sopron is in a cul-de-sac.
It's a protrusion.
And it's called for that Civitas Fidelissima, which means it's a Latin word. It means that a city of
fidelity, right? Or
of most fidel
right.
city, because they wanted to stay in Hungary. The reason I mentioned that because later on it has some very important implications.
So the fidelity in the sense of the faithful, so they stayed faithful to Hungary.
Anyway, after the war, many people don't realize, but we had worse situation, particularly when surviving, than was during the war. Because in the war, at least we got some food, not much, but it was allotted by a system of tickets, and then
like rations.
Yes,
right.
But after the war there was nothing, and during that time we were gatherers and we did things which I probably at this point don't even want to talk because it's embarrassing, because I have to become a thief and robber, and I went into places which were bombed out and collected anything could be eaten or worn or sell on the black market. There was no social security, so my mother, brother and I, we lived on nothing. There was no income for years and years till 1948, when the communists completely took over the government, and by that time there was certain, as far as the famine was concerned, somewhat reduced, because they eventually they managed to distribute food, and I'm not a party. Where did I get the food? But we got some potatoes, some flour, and eventually we did not die of hunger.
And your brother was 1 year younger or older?
1 year younger.
So he was also scavenging for food, or your brother was also scavenging for food, or he was also searching for food? And
Yes, well, you picture this in a day when you are 13, 14 years old boy, and the daily allotment for food was your half of your palm very old bread. Right. Most of it is dust, sawdust in it.
Right.
Okay? And my brother was so hungry, he ate the whole thing right away, and I kept it for lunch and dinner. And my brother used to say, Joe, could you just a little bit? So I gave half of my already very small allotment to my brother Eric. Anyway, I'm mentioning this because it sounds very, how shall I say, almost ridiculous, but at that time it was very important for me and for my brother just to survive.
Right.
Now, in the same time, he went to school, and during the time when was still the war was raging on, we most of the school years we spent in the basement, which was built to be a protection against bombardments.
Right, right. Shelter, bomb
Shelter, yes. So our education was rather spotty, and when finally I became 18 years old and finished high school, I had to go to a state exam, érettségi, we call it in Hungarian, and then they didn't say, I couldn't say, said, look, sorry, I didn't learn that in math or whatever. If I couldn't answer the question properly, I failed. So I went through a very intensive self-taught and managed to pass the exam, and eventually even managed to enter the university.
You were 17 at the time, or 18? How old were you?
17. And then...
So this was 48 or 1948?
1948, yes. And then even today, I remember what was one of the questions at the entrance exam to the forestry engineering school, which was adjacently, conveniently right there. So I couldn't go to I wanted to be a mechanical engineer, but that university was in Budapest, which was 250 kilometers away. I couldn't afford the travel or living there. So if I could just mention it, because it was what does it mean? Log tangent 405 degrees.
Log tangent of 405 degrees. I don't know. Well, that's.
We didn't have slide rules.
Right, that's
nothing.
45. That's 45 degrees. 405 degrees is 45 degrees. So that's 1, and log of 1 is what? It depends on. It's on.
Doesn't matter what nappy or whatever log. 1 is 0.
0, right? That's true. 0.
Well. Anyway, there were some other questions as well, but that time I was good enough to enter the university, and I spent there 4.5 years, and graduated as a forestry engineer. Forestry engineering in Hungary is because we don't have too much forests.
That's erdőmérnöki?
Erdőmérnöki. Erdőmérnöki rang, vagy képzettség. És it's civil engineering with forestry combinations. So I recognize the trees, I learned some biology, some related subjects.
How long was the college? How many years?
4,5 év.
4.5 years.
Yeah, 4.5 years, yes.
Did you have to do military service or not?
Well, we had military service on the summer times. And interestingly, my brother also attended the same school, and then we both got the parancs.
The order.
The order by the military authorities to attend the summer camps. And then somehow they were confused that there is a Joseph Csizmazia and then a Tibor Csizmazia. And every time when I say Csizmazia, and my brother says, okay, jelen, here.
Yeah,
Here.
Present.
And then he said, oh, there is another Csizmazia. No, we already said the one, was enough. So I never spent one day or hour in military service.
Due to your brother.
Because my brother did it instead of me. Anyway, the reason I'm mentioning because communism, they wrote down everything, tried to be very authentic, everything according to the law of the communist laws. Well, of course, you also have to talk about your background as well, how your future life was subjected to all kinds of surprises, tragedies, etc. My mother's father died in the first day of First World War. My father's father got into a prison and broke his hand. And how he got into prison, you may not know that, but Hungary also had a communist government after the First World War. Same thing what the Germans had, a Bolshevik revolution in München. And the communists came to my grandfather's place, who had a smithery, because they didn't like the peasants, because the peasants were glued to the land, and then the communists never could break them away from the land possession. But they figured that a blacksmith is a worker. According to Marx and Engels' description, who is a worker. And then they said, would you please, we have to create communist terror in Hungary. You collect the priest, the manager, and the teacher, and we're gonna hang him on Friday.
Wow.
So when the communists came, they didn't. In the same time, my grandfather said to little Joe, who was my father at that time, 6 years old, he said, "Little Joe, run to the teacher and to the priest and
tell them to run away.
And run away, go up to the hills," which they did. So when the communists came, where are the subjects? We're going to hang them.
1920 or when was it?
I'm sorry?
1920 or what year was it?
1918.
1918.
19.
19,
Yes.
Okay.
And then
When was your father born? Which year was he born?
he was born on 204, 206.
Oh, 1906.
Yes.
1906.
1906. My mother was 2 years older. Yeah. Anyway, so what happened is that the communists couldn't find the teachers, arrested my father, and then put him in jail.
Who was just a kid? Your father was just a kid.
No, my grandfather.
Oh, your grandfather.
Grandfather. And then he will be executed on the weekend. Okay? And then by that time, and at the same time, the Whites came back under Admiral Holt's leadership. And then they tried to defeat the communists in Hungary, and they did. And then they went to the village as well. My grandfather had a smithery. And then the communists wrote down everything. They said that the commissar in Arpash, was the name of that village, is Joe Csizmazia. Well, where is Joe Csizmazia? He's a commissar. We're going to arrest him right now. Well, we couldn't find him. He was in jail. Oh, he was in jail because he was bad anyway, whatever. So they went into the jail and started to kihallgatni. They
Interrogate.
Try to find out why are you a communist, etc. He said, I'm not communist. I was forced to take this job. He said, no, you are a communist, etc. And then they broke his hand in the same time because they were brutally
tortured him, right?
Tortured him. In the same time, my father, Lily Joe, looked through the window and saw that his father now is tortured by not the communists, but the white.
By the Hortys.
By the Horty people. And then, so by that, he ran back, ran to the teacher, and the priest who by this time came back from the hills, and right away ran to the jail. He said, he don't do his ours, and then he saved our life, etc. Never believed him. He had the option, leave Hungary immediately, either to the Soviet Union or Canada, because Canada took semi-communist people because the woodworkers of America were very communistic, very strong, which I later on found out myself. Anyway, the reason I'm mentioning this tragedy, that is my background with my parents.
So what happened to your grandfather then?
Well, he right away left Lily Joe, everything behind, took the first train and ended up in Canada, in Windsor, Ontario.
Oh, wow.
And he lived there, again, because the tragedy is getting on and on. So what happened in the meantime, I managed to finish university. I was accepted in postgraduate work. In the same time, my father was let back from Gulag as a very, very sick man. In the same time, in 1956 I have to go something about talking about your book now.
Right.
You mentioned that at one point you were running to the secret police of the Romanian communist system, and I wanted to make you an agent working with them. Well, by that time, after the university, I was working on my master's degree, and then in the summertime or wintertime, I always skied, ski championships, and I usually won the races in the city championships. And then there was one place when even in April there was snow in northeast of Budapest, about 100 kilometers away, Hideg-hegy, which means cold mountain. And I used to spend there.
It's in the Dunakanyar area, or?
Is
Dunakanyar? Dunakanyar area.
Before the new Komárom, very close to Komárom. Komárno, north of Komárom. And one day, a young man came, and he said, "Hi, Csizmazia," my name, which I was called in high school, by all the mates. He says, "I want to talk to you. You have to help me. I just came back from the Soviet Union. I was in prison camp for 4 years." And I said, "How old are you?" He was just 1 year older than I am. What happens is that when the Russians had these tens of thousands of prisoners driven like sheep or cattle to the railroad stations, some very smart ones sneaked in to jump into the
ravines or something,
and disappeared. And the Russians counted that had so many have to have. When they did have it, they just grabbed whoever was on the street. And this poor boy was grabbed as well. 1 year older than I am. And he says, my father and mother died during the by bombardments, but I have an aunt in Switzerland. I want to go to my aunt, and you have to help me. He said, his name was Kovács Pista. He said, how can I help you? He said, I know that you have a határ megközelítési igazolvány, which I had because by that time I was in research engineer.
So let me just translate. So that is, if you are close to the border to Austria, then you had a special permit to approach the border because he was in forestry, he could get that permit. And so this guy, the Kovács Pista, what is it?
Kovács Pista.
Kovács Pista, this guy that came to Joe to ask him to help him to get to Switzerland, he said, well, you do have this paper that allows you to get close to the border, so help me out.
But of course the border was between two razor wire fence, and inside there were explosive landmines. It's very difficult to do it in summertime, but in wintertime the snow covered it and you could ski through.
Oh, wow.
And this guy knew that I know how to ski. And I said to him, he said, look, Pista.
Because the pressure on the ski is not that high, right? So
the snow in some places was 8 feet high, and the fence was only 5 feet, 6 feet.
So you could
yeah,
ski through, right?
Yeah, also all the explosives, the mines were covered with the snow, you know? And then I said to him, good, learn how to ski, go back to Budapest, which he came from, some office. He had a fake paper, by the way, to even come to that winter place.
Right.
And then what happened is he next November came to Sopron. And I said, we have no snow yet. You cannot, please, here is 100 forint. Go back to Budapest and come back when we have snow in February. No, I'm going right now. And they said, you cannot go through there. Everything is closed down. It's impossible. Believe me, you can. Make the long story short, on 2 days after this happening, at 4 o'clock in the morning, they broke the door down in the kitchen because we had only one kitchen and one room, and I woke up with a machine gun in my mouth. You hazáruló, you goddamn this and that and this. And they said, what you guys talking about? I'm a postgraduate student, leave me alone, a mistake. No, whatever. What happened, they caught the poor guy.
While trying to cross.
Pista gave him the injection, and he bubbled what he did in the last 24 hours. And mentioned the Csizmazia, but everybody knew me in a small Sopron, not very big. Who is Csizmazia? The police instantly knew who I was, you know, whatever. They shot him to dead, the poor guy. Only reason because they arrested me and put me into jail. And I was one of the most horrific experiences in my life, among many other things.
So you were like 22, 23?
And I was about 24.
24 years old.
24. And then I was given a room, a bed, and nothing else, no cover. And it was in cold. The jail in about 30 kilometers east of Sopron, place called Chorna, and I witnessed the tremendous, unbelievable, hard to describe tragedies what went through in that jail. I couldn't see it because there was no window. but I could hear the yelling and the shrieking and in various languages.
They were torturing people?
Yeah. So they, in every couple of hours, they took me to an office where they tried to persuade me that I was a helper of that
The poor
person
guy, yeah.
whose name is Pista, Kovács
He
Pista.
was shot, right?
Yeah, the reason I recognize because they showed his trench coat, and the trench coat had bullet marks across here. And then the officer said, "Do you know this coat?" And I said, "Well, I saw that coat. It was worn by my friend." Because I didn't say, I confess that I talked to this guy, but we never talked about going through you know what I'm saying. He was just a visitor to me.
Right.
Same high school, whatever. But I never believed that. Anyway, they went to my office. They took out my books and correspondence and everything. And eventually they came back to me again and they talked to me somewhat reduced tone. And then finally they said, "Csizmazia, you're going to end up in Siberia, minimum 10 years. But we give you a chance. We know that at the university there are people who don't like us communists. If you occasionally give us a report who are those people," and then I said, "Stop right there. I'm going to be a scientist. I'm not trained to be a spy." "Oh, you are not a spy. You are doing your civic duty. The communists..."
You need to be a good patriot.
Yeah, good patriot, a good communist and everything. You know, really talking. So anyway, make the long story short, because it went on for days and days. I don't know how many days I was in there. I had no idea because I didn't know it was day. I never saw this daylight. Always on the ground, tunnels and everything. Finally, they came an office, and that guy had a nice uniform and everything, clean. And he says, "Oh, I think I can call you Tovarish, Elftars. We are not quite sure that you are a good communist or not, but you came from a working family, and we trust the workers, and then we give you a chance. We really don't want you to be a spy, but if you hear anything, somebody is speaking against the communist system or against the act or talking about that he's working for the American gangsters, then occasionally could report to us." And then I said, "No, I'm not going to do it." He said, "Oh, no, you don't have to come to us. Occasionally, you're going to meet one of our men on the street,
Right.
and you can discuss it." Well, this was in 1954, 55.
Right.
And then by that time, I finished my dissertation, everything in my studies.
In forestry?
In forestry. And then, but in Hungary, they don't call it master degree, it's between PhD and it's a higher degree. You have to go to a foreign country to do some research, visit laboratories on the same field you were, what you were studying. You can go to the communist countries, Russia, Slovakia, Czechoslovakia at that time, Poland. And they said, "I'm going to Poland," because the Poles and the Hungarians never fought each other.
And they have good mountains.
Yeah, and the Zakopane, you know. He even said so, you know. Well, anyway, so on the very same day, suddenly I got the passport and everything, and it was I had a little bit of suspicion that nobody was helping to get anywhere, even to communist countries,
Right.
and suddenly I had the passport, which was very difficult to get. So I got the connection,
Right.
you know. So I said, all right, I'm gonna escape to the west. And then there is a big lake in Sopron, north, it's called Sfertő in Hungarian, and then it's heart of it is belong to Austria, I swear, Csizmazia, they call it. And in wintertime it used to freeze up, and I said, and along the shores there were vineyards. And then one of my friends had a nice vineyard with a little shack in it. So I moved food, about 15 or I can't remember, 18 American dollars I had, bought it on the black market, you know, and I hid it under that, that winter when the Jäg, the ice is firm enough, I'm gonna skate to Austria.
Skate or ski?
Skate.
Skate.
You know. And so I was ready to leave Hungary because I knew that I can. In the same time, the revolution broke out. On the very first day, October 26.
That was in 1956.
1956.
Right.
October 26. And I was sitting, I was taking a plane at 12 o'clock from Budapest to Warsaw. And then a soldier who had the blue decoration on his cap showing that he's a secret police guy, showed me 12 points printed, what the revolutionary students wanted, speaking other languages, study more, better payment for workers, etc., etc., 12 points.
The demands.
The demands.
Yeah.
And
And you were in the airport already, or where were you?
I was right at the airport, you know.
Budapest.
Budapest, yeah. You know what I did with that paper? I ran up to the gate, which is the DC-3 tail dragger, you know, waiting there.
Right.
You know, and ran to the toilet and flushed it. Because I thought, I didn't trust anything, that they're going to find that paper with me, they're going to arrest me, and never go to anywhere.
You said that you tore the paper that had the demands of the students?
Yeah. Anyway, so and finally they said aboard, and then I flew over the Carpathian Mountains and landed in Warsaw. And the director of the Academy of Science of Poland spoke to me fluent Hungarian. He was one of those soldiers, people who, when the Germans overrun Poland in 1939, the Hungarians, there were a lot of prisoner of war soldiers. The Hungarians took every one of them in Poland and let them go free in Hungary, and stayed in Hungary, and in 4 years learned Hungarian. It's just an interesting, you know, how the whole world was kind of out of order.
So when you flew just on the day of revolution, or when did you fly?
The revolution started at 6 o'clock in the evening, and I flew away at 12 o'clock on the same day.
Same day, right.
So I have nothing to do with the Hungarian Revolution.
You just missed it by a few hours.
6 hours.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, then make the long story short, I was in Poland, and then with a colleague, and I was not married yet, but my colleague I went to Poland with, he was just married and had a baby, and he couldn't talk about nothing but his wife and baby, what they're gonna do in Hungary, the terrible, etc. We couldn't go back to Hungary because no telephone communication. Very quickly, everything was, the Czechoslovaks still stayed under communism. And Czechoslovakia, between Poland and Hungary, I even couldn't fly home. Nothing moves.
Right.
So I had to stay in Poland. And eventually, we decided we're not going to go in the same time. In the same time, the radio, we had radios that were taking the university when I was studying. 450 of them fighting the approaching Russian soldiers ran out of bullets. There were two artillery officers and walked over to Austria. And they believed that the Americans going to help us Hungarians anyway, and they come back a week after everything is okay. But they never did. So then the Canadian government found out that there was a Hungarian group of people
So this is the list of names from Sopron, right?
That's a list of Sopron, and there is the picture of it too. And when they arrived, when the Canadian government picked them up and moved them to Canada.
So they went to. So these are these are Hungarian students from Sopron, who when the Russians came in '56 into Hungary, they crossed the border to Austria. And they thought that Americans will help them, but then the Suez Canal broke out, and the Americans didn't help.
Well, I will come to that later.
And then the Canadian government flew them to Canada.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
And they moved them to a clean logging camp in Paul River. And anyway, in the same time, I was in Poland. And I heard that through the radio, because I had a Voice of America,
Free
Radio Free Europe, a German radio, Hungarian radio. I had 5, 6 radios that the Poles gave me. And all night I was listening to these phones. And I found out that my university was probably in Canada now. So anyway, one night, as I was listening to this and studying German all the time to make my German more fluent, because that's the only thing I could use. Anyway, I said, why don't I phone up Vienna beach?
Right.
And then find out that if it is a group of university, they must have some entity, maybe even phone. So I called. Yeah, a contact. So I called it. I said, and she said, how can I help you? Because at that time wasn't the modern phones yet.
Right.
You know, they have to have a connection made by somebody on the phone who help you in that country, etc. And then he said, with my broken German, that he said, my name is such and such, and then I'm living in Poland now. And I found out that my university is in Austria somewhere. Could you connect me to them? He said, unmöglich.
Not possible.
We have hundreds of thousands of crazy Hungarians running here with guns and everything, and no way I can help. But he said, look, what is your phone? So phone number was on my phone because I stayed in an international hotel, okay? And went to sleep. And then about 3 o'clock, the phone rings. The same girl. And I said, well, it says, I found that where are the Hungarian groups? They are in Ferienhort, very close to Salzburg. And then I connected to the police station because I couldn't, because they don't have a phone yet, but the police has, you know.
Okay, we are rolling.
So I said the telephone operator lady that yes, I will talk to that person in Ferienhort and then act as a translator because he apparently has somebody in.
One second, can I turn the light on?
Yeah, right there.
This one?
Yeah. No, the other one.
Okay, this is good. Okay, continue, Joe. I'm checking the light. It's good. Light is good. Yes, go for it, please. So you're gonna act as a
Yeah,
translator?
and I said, okay, I will help. So I picked up the phone and I said, my name is Joe Csizmazia again, because I did not trust anything. I thought that probably could be a sham by the Polish communists, because the Poland was still under Gomulka, was still under communism, but they hated it. And and hated the Russians as well. Poles and Russians don't like each other. Anyway, and I said, I'm George Csizmazia. I was born in Sopron, and then I understand that my university is right in Ferienhorst somewhere, and then the other side, the person, the policeman says, okay, you can talk to him right now. And then I started again, my name is George Csizmazia. He says, I know, my name is George Csizmazia too. I am your father.
Oh, wow.
200,000 crazy Hungarians running down at 3 o'clock in the morning by a lark. I get the phone, pick it up, and gonna talk to my own father.
Wow. So your father went with the students too?
Well, I will come to that. But his picture here somewhere.
Wow.
What happened is that my father found out that the university is in Austria, and then Americans not going to help, because by that time was weeks and weeks past.
Right.
He sneaked back to Hungary again, because it was closed again.
So
by
where was your father?
He also escaped.
Oh, he escaped.
Escaped.
To Austria, then he came back.
And then he wanted to pick up my brother, who was a mining engineer. And the mining engineering, they were fought underneath the mines. You know, when the Russians didn't go after them.
Right.
They made a couple shots here and down the mines. Anyway, they went to my mother, Sopron, because Sopron is on the border, very close. And they said, I will not leave the place because Joe loses everything. You know, my clothing, my papers, I had a brand new motorbike, etc. I wait for Joe. And I said, and then my father said, he said, Rosa, I Russia, I'm going, and then I may be able to go to Canada and see my father. Maybe. And then, anyway, he said, Father, where is my brother? I said, he's with me. Where is my mother? Waiting for you in Sopron. And I said, Father, you know what I gonna do? And he said, I know. You know that I'm not gonna go back to Sopron either.
Right.
You know, but I didn't say that.
Right.
But you know, we had communicated.
Now your father was still sick, right? He was ill at the time.
Is what?
His health was not good.
Very, very poor health. I didn't know that.
When did he die? Which year did he die?
Which year?
Yeah.
I've written down. Just a minute. I will tell you because. Wait, I come to that. Okay. So anyway, at that time there was no communication whatever. In the same time, I was working for a British firm.
Joe, 1 second. So your colleagues, the Sopron University colleagues, they were holding the university against the Russians, and they were shooting them. And you said they ran out of ammunition. Yeah,
and right. We packed up everything and
they
walked over the border.
Right. So the border was right near the university, or
1 kilometer around the whole city. 1 kilometer.
And all the students just went across the border. Right.
You know, probably had grenades or machine guns and shot the mines.
Right.
They told me all kinds of things, but it's hard for you to understand, even to believe
Right.
how they escape people. Whenever they escaped, right?
Wow.
And then there are the pictures.
And at the same time, your father went somewhere else.
So
he
what
left
happened
Austria,
is
right?
that when they picked up my brother found out also, because everybody,
Right.
that his university, when he graduated, also is in Ferienholt. He
Right.
said, I'm going with the university.
Right.
And eventually he was teaching so did I too, because in the first year in Canada, these students couldn't speak English.
Right.
So we were teaching them in Hungarian.
Wow.
I was logging engineering. My brother was a mathematician. He was teaching maths.
So hold on. So how did you end up from Poland to Austria?
Well, okay, we come to that. So anyway, what happens is that's another story. Eventually, in Warsaw, we had a guy delegated to us as a lead, not a leader, but an escort,
Like a chaperone or something.
chaperone.
Right.
But the chaperone could have been a communist, could have been anybody,
Right.
but he wasn't. He was. His name was George, by the way, and
And he was a Polish guy, right?
I'm sorry.
He was a Polish guy.
We are by that time. What happened is that we were living in Warsaw, okay, and then Warsaw is center of Poland. The Baltic Sea is the north,
Right.
and the southern part is Zakopane,
Right.
at the Czechoslovakian border. All right. Now from here, we went to various embassies in Warsaw for get a visa to get out,
But
but
to the Austrian embassy, right?
the Austrians wouldn't talk to us.
Right.
Because he said, no, he said, you are where you are safe, we can't take another Hungarian.
Right.
They also, they were worried about a little bit, about the Russians. Well,
Right.
but he said, well, we could go to the Swiss,
Right.
Követség,
The embassy,
consulate,
right.
the Norwegians and the Swedes, because they were close,
Right.
and then we couldn't go to Switzerland because the plane from Warsaw landed in Prague. So we had to try to avoid flying.
Through a communist country.
Yeah. So we decided to go to Sweden.
I see.
But in Sweden, can you see
So did you
Sweden?
get a visa for Sweden?
Well, what happened is that the Swedes talked to us. We didn't have. My passport said only for communist countries. In French, Hungarian, French and Hungarian, two languages. No Russian was in my passport. Anyway, so in the same time, the escort also found out that we were going to various embassies and tried to get out from Warsaw, but he never said one word to us, But that time we ended up with a lot of money. The money was zloty.
How did you get money?
The Polish government gave me, the Hungarian consulate gave me money,
Oh, I see.
because we stuck there. He said, "Do you need any money?" Well, I got so much money which an engineer would have made it for a full year, or a lot of money. But it was not worth in the West a penny.
Right.
So as we were encouraged to get to Danzig,
The north. Part, right.
yeah. If we can get to Danzig, the consul over there, the Swedish consular, looks after us, and then get to a Swedish postal boat, which comes in, a small boat, every once in a while, because there was still postal communication between communist countries and the neutral
Right.
Sweden. So all right, so how the hell are we gonna go from here to
Gdansk.
Gdansk, you know? And we were sitting there, I've never forget, on a bed, and my friend talking about his wife and kids, and constantly, and then finally here comes the escort, and he says to me, they said, you guys had a terrible time here. We decided to, particularly for Joe, there is the Academy of Science has a chalet in Zakopane. You can spend there 2 weeks, and in the southern part. Right. And he gave me the papers that tomorrow morning be in the railroad station at 8 o'clock in the morning. Make it sure it's 8 o'clock because there are so many going in and out, and there will be a very special one going down there, and even with the sleeping, because it takes 24 hours to get there because the stuff's so many places. Right. Anyway, so I looked at my friend and said, Christ, in the same time, the consul said, if you guys could come such a date because the boat is coming in.
Right. To Gdansk.
So we got caught in the, you know, and then next morning at 7:30 we were ready to somehow avoid the escort and then take not the southern train but the north train. We found out how to get it to the big railroad station. Dozens of aisle. Anyway, we started to look at the ticket again. It was to Gdansk. You know, we took out all the money we had and we gave it to George. Oh, I don't need it, this and that. Also, to the danger. He said, if you don't like it, burn it, you know. Yeah. So anyway, we took the train and ended up in Gdansk.
With your friend?
With my friend. And then as we got out there is the secret police guy walking back and forth with the blue
ribbon or whatever.
Yeah. You know, same, right, probably right. Same in your country too. Anyway, he goes back and forth, and then George at that time, we still didn't know 100% that he's on our side or not. He goes to this soldier and talks to him in Polish, which he couldn't understand one word of it. You know, and he had a big phone, about that big, and he was talking like that, this and that, and then my friend, he said, Joe, Siberia. He said, he's talking to his, you know, his captain or whoever, and I will be taken away. In no time, here comes the Pobieda, a Russian car, a station wagon. And then the guy with the big phone puts the phone aside, and I had a very meager bag. He picks up my bag and puts it in the trunk of the of Pobieda. And then close it, and the last time we saw that guy, and then with George, we were in the Pobieda. And then as we were driving to the city, we looked out, whatever, and then stopped somewhere, and there were big letters at the property of the Swedish kingdom, you know, wow. Because they're the king in Sweden, right. Yeah, or whatever, in Swedish, in English, you know. And by that time, of course, I studied English as well as much as I could, and it's very close to German anyway at that time. And right away the consul comes out. He said, "Come in quick." So we went inside, and we were now safe in Sweden, you know, although it's still Dansk, you know.
Dansk, right?
Yeah. Well, he said we sent our what was the Swedish car? Volvo station wagon. He said the harbor is a military place, and then now the military is very aware of the problem in Hungary. The Russians made a circle around the harbor. The Poles circle the Russians, and then another circle, and now the Swedish driver, chauffeur, was driving in and out of the harbor, wait for the post to come in, post ship. And every time we went through, the gate came up, and the guy gave him butter, chocolate, put it with, the Russians and Poles, and he did that 4 or 5 times. And the consul said, "Now, you guys go. Make it sure we already put
Cover the windows.
in the windows, and stay very low." So we went through all these gates, opened up, and just went through, because they thought they're waiting for the consul is waiting for the post,
Right.
So when we got there, Hitchcock stories. Now picture this: concrete everywhere. When submarines could go here and there, and then no sign of the small Swedish boat yet, and then everything concrete, and suddenly here comes a whole load full of Polish officers, patrols. And then when I saw in Polis's, in the same time we had already had the consul staying with us, so we were 3 of us. And then he talked to the consul. Consul spoke fluent Polish, and then as they were talking about like this, and we didn't know what was going to happen to us, snow started to come down. It's November 20th or something, and here comes a small boat. He said, "That boat is not 100 feet long." Pot, and goes exactly when we were dropped down the walkways, drunk soldiers, this and that, and then as we were standing there, we still didn't know what to do, what's gonna happen. The captain of the boat comes and talks in Polish to the
Consul.
not to the consul, but the guard, the captain or whatever was his rank, and invited him to the boat. And he went up there and came back, he's bulging his pockets.
Right.
Bribe. Anyway, he picks up everything. He took my license, passport away, had it in the pocket, and then he picked up my meager possession, the briefcase and a small coffer, and he carried it up on the ramps, came down, and then reaches over his pocket and gives back my passport, and he said, "Bon voyage," in French.
Right.
And that's the last time I ever saw that communists or whatever. Anyway, it did not take too long to unload the boat, less than half an hour, and then we just walked up on the planks, and then we were already in Swedish territory.
How long was the trip across the water?
How long?
Yeah, how long?
How long what?
The trip to Sweden on the boat.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm coming to this.
Oh.
They said the trip takes about 18 to 20 hours to Norrköping, which is north of Stockholm. So you can picture Dansk, and, we can go to the map or show you.
Right.
Anyway, would you believe it? As we start to edge out from the harbor, I got to the outside of the deck on a small boat, sitting up there, and then said an Ave Maria in Latin. Thanks God, I am leaving this goddamn communist nonsense behind, finally. And then as we got further and further away, there was the water undulating like this, and then lights started disappearing, and here comes the cook. Kommen Sie unter, kommen Sie unter, Sturm kommen.
Yeah. Come now because the storm is coming.
Ja, ja. Essen bitte.
Come and eat.
Yeah, yeah. You know, he didn't speak very good German, but could, you know. And I wasn't. My German wasn't that much either. Anyway, as I said, I started to do this. You know, makes this story. The 18 hours trips took us 7 days.
Wow.
That boat completely destroyed. It was, you know, the beautiful furnitures, Swedish, everything perfect. The beautiful, the kitchen was beautiful. They had a big frigidaire, you know, about 3 times the size of that one. It broke away from the floor and went through the walls, left and right.
Wow.
And the water was that deep, flushing toilet, everything.
Wow.
I was so sick.
Wow.
I was so sick. You know, cars, even now when I can windsurf and I don't get sick, but when I see a boat, I get sick. Anyway,
how many people were on the boat?
well, about the captain, two other officers, and 2 of us.
And then, did they have sleeping cabins or?
Yes, 1 bed only.
1 bed.
So we were sitting side by side.
Right, right.
You know, it was just it wasn't designed for carrying people.
Right,
you know.
right.
Anyway, so what happened is that I went down to our room, and here was my friend, and I said, "I'm so sick." I said, "Oh, poor Hungarian, you don't." I hardly said Hungarian. He had to throw up, and I had a little bowl to wash up. You know, everything. He into the bowl. As the water, I mean, the boat was it spread right out on the ceiling, and the vomit was falling down from the ceiling.
Wow.
Well, for 7 days, and we never got to Sweden. We got to Bornholm. It's an island, Bornholm.
Right.
And then it's
Swedish island?
No, I think it's Danish. or
Finnish, maybe, no?
no, Dutch.
Yeah. Dutch.
Because Bornholm is on the almost most western part of the Baltic Sea.
Okay.
You know, you can picture it.
Right. So the ship was going the wrong way, or?
Well, it just had to go always into the wind,
I see.
because they would have been turned over.
Right.
As a matter of fact, it's the first time I learned that term, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday.
Right.
A German vessel carrying ore sunk very close to us.
In the same storm.
In the same storm. And then, and in the same time, talking about the captain of he was so sick, throw up his beautiful uniform, it just looked terrible, and he tied himself to the capstone. You know what is the capstone?
No.
Capstone is a something to do with the old boats. Right when you steer the boat,
right.
Behind it there is
yes,
a
yes.
post.
Oh yes, he tied himself there.
Yeah, he tied himself to that, and he was driving all the time by hand. Right. And then we went over the waves like this, and then on top the propeller went up to.
It was out in the air, right?
Yeah, because in the air,
Right,
can you
in the
see?
air, right.
And then we went down, you know, and you don't understand, you know. I thought would you believe it? I went outside, even if I know I can be washed over, but I was so sick, I wanted to die. But, you know, I hung up to things and never been outside on that boat before. you know,
So it was cold also, right?
snowing like this. I could have skidded off and would have fallen into the water, and no more story for Joe.
Right.
You know, but nevertheless managed to get back, and then ended up in Bornholm in Yuletide. You know what is Yuletide? Yuletide in the Swedish country is before Christmas,
Right, right.
because by that time
Right.
November, whatever, and everything was just beautiful, neat, and the women and the girls and the people were dressed. It was such a drastic difference after communist Hungary into getting to a Western, civilized, beautiful place, you know. And they were very nice to us. They spoke very good German. And then about 2-3 days, they hammered the boat together that we could go and take up, and the water also, the storm finished, subsided. And then we never got to Norrköping, not even Stockholm, but to a place called Karlskrona. And Karlskrona is one of the lowest part of Sweden, right beside a harbor, which is a navy harbor for the Swedes. Name escapes me right now. A minute ago, it was on my tip of tongue. Will come to me. Anyway, we were the first refugees coming to Sweden
From Hungary.
after the Hungarian Revolution. And right away, the harbor master asked if he would stay in his house because his son is doing his PhD in sociology, and he wanted to know that how engineers or students or whatever survive in Hungary, or what's going on in a communist country. Anyway, every evening we went to a restaurant, beautiful restaurants, but then the wrong side of the road. They don't drive on the right hand side.
Well, at the time they were driving. Now they are.
Well, at that time it was.
On the left side.
And then they want me to drive. He said, I had an international driver's license, I still have it. If you want to see it, I can show it to you. Anyway, the reason, because the Swedes even just looked at the liquor at the dinner and they were drunk. They couldn't stand the aquavit, you know, where spirit of some kind.
Right.
And then after about half an hour, they were so drunk that they couldn't have driven anymore. So after dinner, I was there driving with the harbor master's car back to various places, delivering the various
On the left side of the
offices and everything, on the left hand side of the road. And then one evening, a lady comes, and he says, I heard that there were 2 Hungarian gentlemen here. I was the secretary of Dag Hammarskjöld. Dag Hammarskjöld was the Secretary General of the United Nations in Genf at that time. We intercepted a letter written by the President of the United States, Eisenhower, to the Politburo of Malenkov or somebody, a name escapes me. And the letter went like this, the American letter. Mr. Malenkov, we will not interfere with your situation in Hungary if you will not interfere with our situation in Suez Canal. It broke my heart. When I found this, of course I have to regress a little bit. When the revolution in Hungary was victorious for 2 days, even the occupying Russian forces withdrew and didn't bother the revolution. The Hungarians were not against the occupying Russian soldiers, they were against the communist government of Hungary and secret police people. Okay? And the Russians didn't want to get involved at that time. And the Hungarians sent a delegation to Genf to send a well
Like a peacekeeping or something?
peacekeeping force to Hungary and organize a free election.
Right.
Because Hungary, ever since the communist government took over in 1948, 99% voted for communism.
Right.
Bullshit,
Right.
you know. So, and they said, she told me this, and I crossed my heart. I should write them down, but anyway, in the Security Council, you know who voted against it, sending help to Hungary?
I don't know. Who?
The Russians
The Russian.
and the Americans.
Right.
And then I swore, at that time, I still have the goose pimples, I never moved to America, never, never. Now, how did I got here? I will go to a weekend story, this horror story. Anyway, I lived in Sweden for not very long, almost a year, not even a year. And then,
In Stockholm?
no, Ronneby.
Oh, Ronneby.
Never, at one point, I ended up not in Stockholm, but in Uppsala. Uppsala is a university town above Stockholm,
Right.
north of Stockholm. And then they gave me a free,
Scholarship.
a free living quarters because I'm a postgraduate student, you know,
Right.
as a natural thing to do, you know, to those things, to me, unbelievable gifts and help and everything. The Swedes were very nice. And then, by the way, when the Swedes found out that, anyway, and I connected right away I phoned the university in Canada by that time and talked to the dean. And he said, Joe, you are in Sweden, would you come and teach your line, because we're going to teach Hungarian 2 years, and after 2 years, and very strong English courses, and after 2 years, the students join into the Canadian faculty.
So all your colleagues from Sopron, they actually were in Canada already at the time?
I'm
All
sorry?
your colleagues from Sopron, they ended up in Canada already?
Yes. In the same time, what happened, including father, my brother, and the whole thing picked up by the Canadian government,
And they were shipped to Canada?
shipped to Canada,
Which city?
Vancouver, British Columbia.
Oh, in Vancouver.
And then from Vancouver, for about 30, 40 miles on the coast of opposite sides of Vancouver Island is Campbell River. There was an old logging camp with our facilities in it. It was well kept, shacks and
Right. And so how many Hungarians went there?
450 or what?
Wow.
Yeah. Anybody was there, here are the names. You can see my name over there, here, CS.
Right. Yeah, two Csizmazias.
Yeah, because my brother and I.
So he died in 79?
I'm sorry?
Your brother
Yes,
died in 79?
yes. He was smoking. Yeah.
So he was just 47
Yeah,
years
no,
old?
well, I come to that. So what happened is that finally they got to Canada, and when I got there, of course, my father and brother, he said, how about grandpa? Because he was living in Canada.
Right.
Would you believe it? 2 weeks before my father got to Canada, his father passed away.
Wow. So you never met him?
And I never saw my grandfather. So if you want to have tragedy, already, you know, my family is not very lucky. And anyway, I went through a very strong language. I learned 50, 60 words every day, except I didn't know how to pronounce it.
The English words, right?
English word.
Right. In Vancouver?
No, I was in the camp too.
Yeah, in that camp.
I lived in the camp. And then...
Did you get food there? Did
they cooked, but Hungarians, including my father, took over, became a cook.
Oh, wow.
because they had Canadian food and Hungarians didn't really like whatever they eat.
Your mother was still in Hungary at the time?
Still in Hungary.
Were you able to correspond? Do you have letters or?
Well, at that time the letters went through, and then I even could phone home. We didn't have a phone in our, but the university when I was studying, of course, the university still stayed there,
Right.
and whoever did not go through with the fighting the approaching Russians, the other forestry engineers took over the
Right.
teaching and whatever, and they had a phone on the faculty, you know, and whenever we phoned there, I phoned that phone, and they called my mother in, and we could talk to mother, you know, through
Right.
Canada, and then what happened is that I went into the logging camp,
This was 57, right?
57, and ended up in North British Columbia in a logging camp, and then the workers, when I found out I was a Hungarian communist, no, not communist, fascist, fighting against Uncle Stalin. They got the caulk boots. You know what is a caulk boot?
Yes.
The spikes on it.
Right.
And the shacks were like this kind. The two people lived here, two people here. In the middle there was a big stove, because the whole thing was in a swamp. And all these wet shoes, wet socks, everything is drying there.
Right.
So I was given to a room, one bed, with a Canadian guy. And the Canadian wouldn't.
They didn't like you.
He said, you know, they spoke English. I don't know what the hell they were talking. And on the other side, alone, was a big, huge Canadian Indian. And then he said to me, never forget, you fuck with me. But I didn't know what fuck meant, or I didn't know anything, you know. And he said, sleep with me, sleep me. But I started to understand something, because I studied it day and night. And then, anyway, he took me in, and my language even now reflects some of the Indian, which will be eventually will be very interesting again, because what happened is on this logging camp next September.
Why didn't you sleep with your father and your brother?
Well, what happened is that I got a job, you know, and also my father had the difficulty with the language. He studied, but he was very sick man, very sick person, and then he couldn't understand. Well, to learn English from Hungarian, it's not that easy. You know that. We Hungarians think completely differently.
Right.
There's no words. There are many Hungarian words. There's no equivalent in English. Okay. So my father had trouble with it, and then he said, look, I don't stay with the Hungarians too long. I got to speak English proper, and then I got the job as a
forestry engineer? Or
no. They hired me as a camp engineer, and then the first job I got dug the latrine.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and things like that, you know. And well, and then one day, one of the loggers came to me, and he was shaking a little bit, because he always had to fly in the whiskey from the open water for about 80 miles fjord. You know what is a fjord?
Right.
Yeah. When the camp was. But many times the fog was so heavy that the aeroplane couldn't get through. And that time there was nothing to drink. But and then the food came through the boats. They could get through the Brem River was the name of it. Anyway, and then he says, with a broken German, he said, I'm from Estonia, and I was the same age as you are. At that time I was 26 years old. I looked about 20 or whatever. And he says, leave this place right now. Here is the money. And then just go back to Vancouver and never come back here, because you will be like me. And showed me, he said, his fingers were missing and he was wrecked, alcoholic and everything. Can you see me? I was same age as you, and now I'm a wreck, like that. And then what happened is that, you know what is be a chokerman?
A what?
Chokerman?
Jokerman?
Choker.
No, I don't know what a choker.
Choker means to the big logs is choked with a cable, and then it lifted up to the cable, and there is a carriage on the cable, and a half a mile down there is a winch which moves that carriage back and forth and picks up the big logs. Not picture this, that the slope is that steep. There are tens of not tens but thousands of thousands huge Douglas firs, 4, 5, 6 feet diameter. The DBH, the DBH means diameter breast height. So you big one, cut down, and when they picked up some of them, the whole mountain is moving, and you are in the middle of it. Every day, one person dead in British Columbia at that time. And then sometimes if it was Douglas fir, but sometimes mixed growth. And the worst was the cedar tree. The cedar tree shatters, and then the skin of this cedar tree is very good for shakes or healthy. Inside is empty or rotten or whatever, and sometimes they splinter. And the splint can be 30, 40 feet long, 3, 4 feet wide. And they come down like a toboggan. And they're going, I don't want to say how fast, but like a rocket.
Like a train.
Yeah. And then this Indian, only friend I had in this whole logging camp.
What was his name?
You know, I really don't know. I'm sorry. Can you say?
Do you know what tribe he belonged to?
No, I couldn't speak with him because I never could communicate with him fluently. Just you, me, who they go left, right, eat. Yeah, that's all. But I couldn't really.
Did you see animals there in the forest?
Well, I tell you a story. Is they called me in because they said, you are Hungarian, you are Hungarian. You are in the revolution. Yeah, I'm in the revolution. I didn't say I wasn't in the revolution, but yeah. He said, and they gave me a big gun. You know, he said, the other day, the grizzly bear came down, and the loggers at lunchtime had eating, and the scope came through the group of the people, and one stupid logger caught the hard hat and whacked the
grizzly cub in the head.
Yeah, because the little guy just like that, just like a kid, really went begging because they were eating hams and bread and this, begging, you know, and the mother hid it, and his mother rode in. And those guys climbed on lily trees and twigs and this and that, and refused to go to work unless there will be a guard. So my job was now sitting on a big stump with a gun, you know, and mosquitoes by the millions, trillions, and then sun came, and then everything is burning. The whole, and by the way, there was the biggest forest fire ever recorded. Smoke, fire everywhere, and we were down on a swamp, you know, and then I never saw the grizzly bear after that, you know, so I never shot anything. After 3, 4 days, I said, I don't want this gun, take it back and get somebody else. So in the weekend, I used to go always with a little boat and then explore, because as a complete,
So you could see the Victoria Island from there, or?
well, we were way away from everything. The fjord was, it takes 3-4 hours for the boat to come through.
Oh, so this is towards Whistler, right? That area?
North of Whistler,
North of
by
Whistler.
about 300 miles north
Oh, I
from
see.
Whistler, 400 miles north. Top of Port Hardy of Vancouver Island, even from there on the other side, on the mainland, a little bit north, is that Bram River. So there was the rock. I always wanted to climb rocks. Okay, there was a big rock wall, and left the little boat behind and climbed that on the rock wall, and sure as hell there was a little bit of a crack like this, and the most beautiful 2 boxes, and you know
Two
that
what?
box,
Oh,
you know, cedar box, cedar like a little coffin type of
Okay.
idea, and then I said, Joe, because everybody says that the fortunes were buried here by Captain so and so, you know,
So
all
it's like
kinds
you
of
found some
bullshit.
gold or
And
something.
finally, not laborer like this, Joe, doesn't matter degrees or whatever, but you were just a laborer, okay, or worse of it, not very good at it either. And he said, well, anyway, I reached in and pulled it out, and you know what I found in it?
I don't know.
A lily skeleton.
A little skeleton.
A skeleton, baby,
A baby skeleton.
baby, beautifully,
Dressed.
the flesh is gone, that the skeleton was dressed in a very beautifully handmade this and that.
Was like an Indian?
Yeah, Indians. And the only way you could, they went up on the top of the cave and lowered it down. They couldn't get it from bottom up because I had to use my skill to rock wall, and I was ready if I fall into the water, kind of a deal.
Right.
It was about 50, 60 feet up, and it's still there today. I never said that to anybody else, that they're not going to disturb them.
There were 2 boxes? Or
Two
just
of
one?
them,
And both of them had baby skeletons? Or?
yes.
Wow.
And they were, you know, nicely made combs made from
Bone or something?
bones of something, beautiful shells, and almost like, you know.
Wow. That's quite something.
Anyway, so just to finish up,
So you were in the camp, your father and your brother were also in the same camp or not?
no, my father couldn't because my father was sick.
Right.
He stayed with the camp and started to cook for them,
I see.
good Hungarian cook.
So where was the camp relative to where were you now? They were the same area or? Well, the camp with the students. Where was that?
The Paul River.
Powell River?
Paul River, it's in, you know, there is Vancouver and there is West Vancouver,
Okay.
and then you go on the road and then eventually get to Whistler. You know,
Okay, right.
you know, on now when you turn into, you know, the big rock wall
Yes.
before you get to
What is it called? Snoqualmie or what?
yeah, something like that. It turns a little bit north the road. You have to take a little boat and get into on the other side of the shore, still on the shore, and then go to Paul River,
Okay.
30, 40
And
miles
that's
from
where
there.
the Hungarians were, right?
That was the Hungarians were
So
over
they were
there.
all 400 were there?
Yes, yes,
And your father, your brother were there?
yes.
But
yeah.
you went up north to this Bow River or what?
Not Bow River, I said it. I will tell it again.
Okay.
Because you could go out,
I see.
can you see? And because then there were no gates or whatever.
Right.
But I had to drive because after Sweden, every Swedish I had worked with spoke 3 other languages fluently
Right.
besides Swedish. They all spoke German,
English.
English and French.
Right.
And I was that big with my broken German
Right.
and nothing else. And so I said, Joe, you got to speak this fucking language, like it or not. Study, and get away.
Right.
And you know, I was close to contact with them, and you know, on the weekends we always went back to Powell River.
Right.
I didn't have a car, but people, friends, drove us or whatever, and there was no communication any other unless you had a friend.
And what were the Hungarians doing in the camp? They were studying or?
Studying. The Canadians provided teachers of English. They provided cooks, and then and medical help. The doctors.
Did people get married there? Were people in love? Some people, students, they were women too, or just?
You know, I really don't know. I'm not familiar with that.
Because I looked at the names, a lot of girls
Yeah,
too. So
because the last thing I wanted to get involved with women.
I see.
You know, not because it was not the time to. You know what I'm saying? How could you? You know, when you met Ildiko in your book or whatever, you guys. I'm not saying that you guys didn't have as much turmoil, but you know what we went through.
Right.
It's
It's a different scale.
different, totally different everything. That's the reason I wanted to talk to you about it, because, well, only thing I want to finish this discussion. On September I got back to university, and we were ready to teach and you know, get organized, to go to the library and this and that.
River or back to Vancouver?
No, Vancouver, British Columbia, UBC,
Right.
University of British Columbia. And then there is a church there, Presbyterian Church, and the Presbyterian Church decided to have a garden party for the Hungarian faculty.
Right.
So by that time I was part of the faculty, dressed very strong, like an old logger, you know, a young logger and everything. And then when we got there, all the ladies, you know, walking by, drinking coffee and this and that. And then I saw this young, probably strong-looking young guy. Yes, and then the ladies really wanted to know about the Hungarian Revolution, which only thing I know about it, what I heard from my brother or my colleagues, because I wasn't in the revolution as I mentioned it before. I was in Warsaw at that time. Right. Anyway, and then every time when I wanted to say something, what the Russians did when they came or whatever, what we did, every time I used this connecting word, fucking. Right. Fuck. And of course I did not knew what that word means at all. And every time when I said that, the girls hick. And then eventually the vicar came and warned me not to use certain word I am frequently using, etc. And some other older Hungarian friend who wanted to be a priest in the Presbyterian Church explained to me what the meaning of that word, and I was very much embarrassed. So when the vicar is gone, the ladies came back again. Right. And then they wanted to know more about the Hungarian Revolution. And every time when I came to that connecting word, I didn't say that, you know. And then every time I did that, the girls got a little bit less interested. Eventually, they completely abandoned Joe because he wasn't interested anymore.
I see.
And then, make the long story short, we were teaching the Hungarian faculty for 2 years in Hungarian, and then they UBC.
And where were you housed? Did you get housing there? Did you get housing?
Oh yes. I got a very small $250, and then when but my brother got $250 and my father got $250. So when we moved to Vancouver, eventually we still had that money for another couple of years came until the university completely was defunct because everybody got a degree,
Right.
or whoever were good
So
enough
this
to.
was 58 already or 57? 58?
58, 59, yeah, at that vicinity of that time. Anyway, and I got when the teaching was over, I got a job as a statistician with one of the professors, Canadian professors who did some research, and particularly statistical proof of his progress in the work. I did.
Was it related to forestry or?
Yes, forestry faculty. You know, so everything has to be rather. Have you any done any statistical work?
Yes, I have.
Congressional, you know, the T-squares, chi-squares, and all kind of nonsense. Regression analysis. Yeah, that was very complicated to write it down by hand.
No computers at the time.
No, but in the same time, computer was introduced in British Columbia, and when I went to the faculty to solve my regression analysis, which I used to do by hand for weeks, and if I made a mistake, I never would know if I did. And then it was a perfect place to try computers. And then I was very much interested and enrolled, and I took a computer second degree course. And I eventually graduated with a master's degree in computer science, applied to forestry, and I have I could show you the papers. Anyway, so and then from then on, because I had a
What did your father do at UBC?
well, my father he was trained in the army as a car mechanic. He started a car mechanic shops for the Hungarian because slowly people got a Morris Minor or an old car or they resurrected something, and he made a little living, and also we helped him, you know, brother and I, and then. And anyway, even when I got back to Vancouver, I took a job up at Grouse Mountain because there was a chairlift going up there because I wanted to speak English.
Right.
So I was working on the chairlift, helping people get out. Please, this way, learn the words and whatever. And in the evening, I stayed with the crew up there, and then. As a matter of fact, there was an Austrian guy whose name was Stefan Pless, became a very good friend, helped me, and I learned English again, and slowly, after I got my master's degree, I spoke well enough and write well enough.
Where is Grouse Mountain? Where is it?
Grouse Mountain.
How close is to Vancouver?
Oh, right in North Vancouver, right in town.
Oh yes.
Yeah, if I have to go up and
They had an Olympics also. They had like a slalom run, right?
Yeah.
In the Olympics.
Yeah, well, I had something there for the slalom, I guess.
Yeah, for slalom.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Okay, and then because I had this original introduction for computers, the government hired me as a research man and worked for the Canadian Forest Research Laboratory. And they sent me all over in Canada, in every province, to introduce computer applications in forestry work.
And did you do Fortran coding or something?
There was no Fortran yet. I was writing in a program in hexadecimal systems,
Okay.
and then the binary was converted, was introduced. four
Did you use punch cards or
punch and tapes.
punch tape? Right?
Punch
Paper
tape is-
tape,
yeah.
paper tape, yes. I know. I use them too.
Yeah,
20
really.
years later.
So that was good because I traveled everywhere, Northwest Territories on government. You know, it was a very, very good job. You know,
Were you skiing during the winter time? Or?
I skied all the time whenever I could. As a matter of fact, I met my wife skiing on Mount Baker because Mount Baker was the only place you could ski from 100 kilometers from Vancouver, which had facilities like lifts and rope tows and everything. At that time, there was nothing except the Grouse Mountain.
Yeah, Whistler didn't exist.
Whistler was not. Whistler was another 10 years, and then I was involved with Whistler because I by that time worked for a private company called Columbia Consulting Engineering, and the guy who owned that company was also a Hungarian who designed the lift up to Grouse Mountain. His name was Peter Wojda, and Peter, when he was designing all over the world paper particle board factories. Particle is made for sawdust, glue, etc. And that's the way I got to United States, because we had designed several factories in United States, building particle board factories, and sometimes there were breakdowns, mechanical or whatever. They always send me because I have an ability to figure out something is just not right, you know. And that's the reason I came down here in 1960. First time, 1965. First time at the Columbia River here, we were going to, and they said, well, you cannot work in America because you don't, you know, you are not an American citizen or immigrant. And I said, okay, I'll go back to British Columbia. Then, you know, I don't care. Fly back tomorrow morning. And they said, no, you can stay here. We give you a green card. I didn't know what green card was at all. And I got the green card probably in 1965 or 67 or thereabout, and I have it even today.
Wow.
And Mr. Trump is not very friend of mine because I have a green card and I take up American citizenship. And I didn't take up American citizenship because that lady who was secretary of Hammarskjöld told me that the Americans left the Hungarian Revolution down and did not send a delegation to Hungary to organize a free election. And I'm sorry. I love the American people, but I have not very keen of the American government doings, even today. Thank you for the recording.
So going back to, so you were in you were in UBC for a while, and then you got hired by this company. What was the Columbia? What was the company name?
Well, first I worked for the Columbia. I worked for the Canadian government in forest research.
Right. Yeah, and then you were doing the programming with them, right?
Yeah, and then one day, you know, in one day I went up to Grouse Mountain. For some reason, met other people and whatever, and then here were three kids skiing, one girl, two boys, and then I always liked people how to ski and a little teaching and this and that, and turned out that his father was Peter Wojda.
The guy who designed the
right? And Peter Wojda was also a very, very good skier, and then he was taught. He said, "Can I talk to you? You speaking language Hungarian?" He said, "Yeah, I do." Whatever. He said, what you do, what kind of engineer? He said, I'm a forestry engineer. He said, oh, he said, we need one because we're designing particle board factories and we are involved with all kinds of lumber and then whatever, and we have to know which is best for comply with that in connection with the oils and chemicals and glues we are using. And then we need somebody in my engineering section with a forestry engineer, and would you join my company? And right away, of course, I did. And then shortly after Whistler Mountain started, we talk about, and then they hired Columbia consulting engineers, mainly not because of me, but Peter Wajda, who had connection to building the first lift in Vancouver. And then one of the chief organizers, name was Frans Wilhelmsen, a Norwegian, married a very wealthy Canadian lady, and he started Whistler Mountain idea.
What year was that?
I would say 1967, thereabout.
Right.
Okay. And then...
So you were already like 10 years in Canada by then.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. By that time I, I had a degree.
And you were not married yet, right?
I was married a year before.
Oh, okay.
47, I got married.
67.
What did I say?
You said 47.
No, not 47. No, 67.
67.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Right.
Can you see I'm jumping back and forth? Yeah. Anyway, what I was talking
Well,
about.
then they started Whistler in 68, right? And they hired a Columbia company to participate in the Whistler development.
Well, what happened is that first they sent me up to find out that what are the possibilities of at all how runs are laid. Is there continuous runs or just benches,
right,
or whatever? And then right away
it was all forest at the time, right? It was all forest at the time. There was no...
No, there was nothing.
Forest,
Everything
right?
forest, yeah.
Okay.
There was nothing, yeah. And then, as a matter of fact, too bad that you didn't come earlier, because I just sent all my resumes, drawings, pictures, and everything else to the Whistler Mountain Museum.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The first time I ever got there with my shoulder with the skis. First time I skiing the bowl alone. Nobody skied there ever before.
Wow.
And then this and that. As a matter of fact, I have a picture down in your room.
Do you remember what skis you had at the time?
Oh, the 210 split can.
I never skied on those.
Yeah. Well, because at that time I raced as well. So and eventually I became I'm a certified Canadian alpine coach, and then I was and a ski instructor as well, certification. The reason I did it because I was always involved with skiing.
Right. And then, so how many years did the Whistler project last?
Well, the Whistler project was even today they're still working, because they developed the other side of the mountain.
I know, I've been there, yes.
Yeah, and then they even now recently connected
Yes.
the two peaks.
Sky.
Yeah. It wasn't. It was after I left the place. I left the place in 81, 82 to Sun Valley.
Right.
With my family, because my wife never really liked it in Canada too much. Now she lives in Canada, and then we went over. I wanted to take them to go to West Yellowstone, because I think everybody should go to West Yellowstone and see
Glen Tarby.
yeah.
That
And we couldn't go in there because of the high snow, so we ended up, I said, okay, we go to Sun Valley, driving all day practically, with the whole family, and then we got to Csizmazia.
How many children did you have at the time?
3 of them,
All 3 of them.
yeah. The youngest one at that time was Eric, and then Eric had a tragic life. Yeah, Eric became. Eric was the smartest of my kids. Very good with computers, very good with math. I never had to teach him anything. You know, Patrick, I had to teach him how to solve an equation or something. Kim doesn't need too much education. She's also very smart. Patrick is dyslexic, and those people think differently. They are very smart, but differently. You know, I found out. Eric was the best. And Eric had a very beautiful girlfriend, and when in the 3rd years of university, probably.
Which college was that?
University of Utah in Salt Lake City. And then the girl was one of those beautiful Euro-Asian ladies from Singapore. And then her parents are very wealthy and everything, and she used to visit us, the lady, in Ketchum, and my wife Mary and Willie liked her because she was very handy, absolutely stunningly beautiful girl. And then one day visiting us, they were driving back to Salt Lake City, 3 hours drive from Ketchum, Idaho. She had a very powerful cabriolet. How do you call the
Station wagon?
Big car with
RV or?
how do you call those cars? You can take the top off and roll back. Cabriolet.
Oh, it's like a convertible.
Yeah.
Convertible.
Yes. She was driving it, and then about 10-15 miles before Salt Lake City, there's a divided highway. Yes. She lost control, drove into the
wall?
Not the wall, but the
bridge?
Between the 2 highways, whatever was there, and she flipped it. She was ejected, and Eric was stayed because he had the seat belt, and then she got seriously hurt, and then she was in a hospital, and then Eric called Singapore to the parents, come right away because she may not make it. And they did come 2-3 days after, and during that time Patrick was with the lady all the time in the hospital wherever he could. And then they bought an older Singaporean Chinaman with them, and then married that girl to that old man right in her deathbed.
Wow.
And when Eric saw that,
Did she survive or not?
I really don't know. This is my son Eric when he gets his degree.
He's very handsome.
He was very smart. He was he got into marijuana and all the drugs. He was in the jail in and out. And finally now he is in Medicine Lake before.
In Wyoming or?
No, it's in Washington. You know where is Spokane?
Yes, yes.
Just very
Yes.
below Spokane, there is a name called Medicine Lake, and there is a mental institution, and they're keeping him right there. But
You talk to him?
yes, and it's a tragedy. I don't even want to talk about it. It's cost my marriage too, because in a marriage when these things happen, I know it's your fault. You don't want to talk about it. You know what I'm saying? And then slowly, my wife is more practical than I am. I'm a Hungarian. I am a little bit emotional. My wife isn't emotional. She's practical. And then once she couldn't help, we spent over $250,000 or more. We bought him houses, cars, trucks, lawyers, all in vain. It's all gone, and no help. And then just very recently, a couple of months ago, Thanksgiving, I went down and then carried some pictures for him, and then some of his studies, because he was very good writing any kind of essays on any subject, and then to encourage him to drop back to normal life. Everything for me. How about for guy who don't know anything about it?
Right. So
You know.
it's rolling. I'm recording now. I'm recording.
Well, you heard that. By the way, I wrote the first corporate program on punch cards for Columbia Consulting Engineers, for engineering company. There's payroll, works, who's all working here, how far they got, etc., etc. I had about 6-7 girls in my computer department punching and everything, and then we even didn't have a computer. We have a telephone modem down to Seattle with a 1620 computer, IBM at that time, and then. If they wanted to use that program, which I wrote, it went something like this: "Good morning. How can I help you?" And just tell me that what do you want? You want to have that so and so working for such and such a job? How far they got? No problem. Just punch in 112. Wanted to know how much is the job comes? They just pay 112.3 or whatever. And that way the computer taught the girls how to use it. The girls didn't have to know the computer. And then presently this goddamn thing, I still don't know how to use my cell phone. As a matter of fact, right now, here is YouTube, and then suddenly nothing comes up new, and for days and days now, no YouTube.
I can fix that for you.
You could?
I can, yes.
Well, okay, thank you.
Let's continue with the story. So you want to tell me how you met your wife?
Yeah, well, it went something like this. My mother used to come out from Hungary and visit me, and then at this.
First, before that, what happened to your father and your brother?
Well, my father died, as I told you.
Died in Vancouver?
No, he visited my son, who was a mining engineer in Hudson Bay, and then my father went up to Hudson Bay, and he got very sick, put him to a hospital, and then died in the hospital. He wanted to, he said, "Joe, if you, but I was still studying, if you have a chance, I would like to talk to you once more." And then I didn't have money to go to.
So
from
what year did he die?
Is what?
What year did your father die?
Well, I'm thinking about that because I was in it's. I will come to me.
Okay. But he visited your son, or?
I'm sorry?
Who did he visit in Hudson Bay?
My son Eric.
Oh, your son Eric.
Yeah,
Oh.
because he was the mining engineer in North. He became a mining engineer supervisor, Northwest Territories.
So your father lived quite long life then, right?
Well, he died when I was 32 years old.
I see. But then how come your son, how old was your son?
1 year younger than I am.
Oh, your brother, not your son. You were talking about
So my son has nothing to do with it.
Oh, because you said your son. Your
No,
brother was,
brother.
Your brother was, I got it.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Okay, so your brother was in Hudson Bay,
Yeah,
and your father went to visit your
Yes,
brother.
yes.
I see. And he died in Hudson Bay.
yeah, and then and then we couldn't bury him. Eventually, I borrowed money from that professor. I was doing statistical work. He didn't give me the money, but at that time there was a bank, Nova Scotia Bank at the campus, and even today I have Nova Scotia Bank of my little, and then he countersigned, and I borrowed $2,000 for a trip from Vancouver to Thompson, Manitoba. Actually, it's not Thompson. It's called Tepa, T-H-E-Pa. It's a French name, in Manitoba. We had to bring the body down from the Hudson Bay there because everything was frozen.
Right.
And then so we couldn't be digging.
You couldn't bury it.
Yeah. And then just tell you how my life is full of tragedies. Is many years after he passed away, I started to make a little money and I had a small aeroplane, and I picked up my daughter Kim, who lived in Alberta, and we flew to Tepa across Canada to set up a tombstone. We couldn't find the place when my father was buried, so we went to the church, a Catholic church, and then they said, "Yeah, we can tell you," and that turned out to be they couldn't tell me because at the very time when my father was buried there was an epidemic by the Indian tribe who lived there, and they took the book and they never returned the pages. And then when we got to Tepa, sitting in a rather well-kept cemetery, there were dozens of well-kept graves and everything, unknown, and one of those father was my father. So even I couldn't even.
So where is your grandfather buried?
My grandfather, well, that's what I'm talking about.
Well, your father and then your grandfather was also, he
Yeah.
also died in...
Yeah. But first my grandfather died,
Right.
and then
Where is he buried?
it's a good question. I think he was buried in White Horse, up in the Northwest Territory, and then he was cremated.
So back to your meeting your wife. Where did you meet her?
And anyway, I should have the year. Could be 67.
So about 10 years after you arrived here.
Yes. And then.
You had a good relationship with your father?
Oh yeah, very good. He was a very. Everybody liked my father. He was a person who could do. He was very smart. He pictured that you know what happened to him with his father gone. He had very poor education, none. As a little boy, he was brought up by uncle and this and that here and there, and they taught him to be a what's the name of that profession who are making drums, barrels?
Cooper.
Cooper.
Yes.
Cooper. That taught him to be a cooper because he wasn't that physical. Because the grandfather was blacksmith.
Right.
There you have to be a little bit.
Right,
Yeah. Anyway, so I don't know what I'm talking. So what was the question?
The question was, how did you meet your wife?
Yeah. Anyway, so my mother used to come out from Hungary and visit me, stayed with me a week or two. I rented some place to live, decent place,
You
because
didn't want to move to Canada?
no, because she couldn't speak the language, and then she wanted to go to the church every day.
Right.
And in Canada, it's very difficult to go to the church every day because the distance is,
Right.
you know, whatever.
And what was her relationship to your father? Your mother and your father, did they still get along, or they were?
Oh, well, they never, very seldom lived together because I would say I have some picture showing me as a little baby boy and my father and my mother, and it seems to me they look like a very handsome couple.
Right.
You know, I probably could show it to you if I find it. And I think there was no problem except the war interferes.
Right.
You know, only thing, you know, I know that my mother had the menopause.
Right.
You know what is
Right.
menopause? It hit her so hard. She was a very religious person. Every day áldozat, és ment gyónt áldozat templomba 6 órakor reggel.
So
Every
she
day.
would go to church every morning at 6 a.m.
She almost jumped out on the window, committed suicide.
Really? Because of menopause?
Yeah. And then by that time I learned about that because we were, as a boys, we were taught how to behave with people who are wounded, whatever, during the war, because there were no men. Only Boy Scouts, young boys, were taught to be nurses, kind of deal. And I just hit my mother very hard on the face. She didn't know I hit her, and she came back. Whoa, 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 whoa.
You hit her because you were afraid she's going to commit suicide?
She was suicidal because of menopause, and she didn't know.
Wow.
She didn't know what happened to her.
Wow. How long did she live, your mother?
83.
Oh. So she had a long life.
She had a long life, yes. So anyway, it was a day when 4th of July, and on Mount Baker, there is always a race, a giant slalom, and then a jump hill,
Right.
and then they ski through the pond,
Right, the water pond.
water pond. And then I got there a little bit late. And by that time I was one of the member of the mountain rescue over there. We rescued people.
Right.
And I used to take people up to, in Vancouver I used to organize pre-season trainings. Sometimes I had 300-400 people, rented schools, and then was running with them twice a week, and different people and whatever, and picked them up and we, with buses going to Mount Baker. So everybody knew me in Mount Baker. Anyway, go back to the what happened.
4th of July.
They said, and here comes our darling Mary Ann, 150 feet. And I said, 150 feet on a small jump hill, or something is wrong. And here comes McConkie. McConkie was a very famous skier, 120 feet. Marianne is 20 feet better. Things like this on a loudspeaker. And then by that time I had a little liquor too, because liquor everywhere. Friends, hi Joe, hi Joe, hi Joe. You didn't go into the race. What happened? Because I took my mother to the airport and she's going back. Well, that was Mary Ann, my wife. So I walked up to the jump hill, and all the boys, I said, Mary Ann, what kind of wax, how to do this? And then she was with a little dark pants and a white shirt, giving out instructions, you know. and then I got up to her and said, "You are quite a woman, quite a girl." And she looked at me and she turned away the head right away because of my accent or whatever. So about the next spring, next fall in Seattle, by that time I had in Whistler, I had a company called Pacific Ski Air, and the helicopter skiing. And then I had a nice. Is what?
That was your company?
Yes, yes. And then I had a nice film made of it, which somebody stole, but that's the next story. And then I used to have a rented, there was always a pre-season advertisements for various ski companies selling boots, shoes, this and that. And then also advertising to Grouse Mountain or whatever. And I was advertising my helicopter skiing, you know, with that film, with a little boot. And here comes Miriam walking by like this. And then she looked at me because not always people were around, you know.
Right.
And then I said, "I know you from somewhere." And I said, "Tell me, you are that girl who jumped further than McConkie?" "Well," I said, "that it just happened only once," she said very modestly. And I said, "Oh, yeah." And that evening I took her to dinner. And from then on, about 2 months after, we got married.
Wow. What year was that?
That I should know, and I do know, because
So 68 or so? Or?
no. I got married to 66.
66.
Yeah. And our first child was born in 67, Kim.
Right.
By the way, Kim is that girl climbing on the
On the ice climber.
ice climber, but she was on a national ski team, too, very good cross-country skier. And her husband is this girl. She was having this girl when he ran away with another girl.
Oh wow.
And I've taught that guy how to fly my airplane and this and that, a very good connection. Right now I cannot even talk to him.
It's your son-in-law, right?
Son-in-law.
Where is your daughter now? Where does she live?
Kenmore,
Oh, Kenmore, yes.
Kenmore, Alberta.
Right.
And then Patrick, when you go down there, Arkansas pictures down there with Patrick, my son, married a lady. A lady married Patrick, kind of a deal.
Right.
Patrick is, as I said, dyslexic person. He managed to have a license, a real estate license, with his girlfriend. But the girlfriend is a graduate lawyer. And then she married Patrick, and when she found out that she's pregnant, she divorced Patrick.
Wow.
So when the child was born, we went to Marion and I went to the christening back to Sun Valley and all that.
Amazing, right?
Yeah. We visited the parents and everything for when she was a little girl, and after that, no more connection. Now my son, that girl is probably a very athletic girl. Patrick is 15, that girl is probably 15 years old, and then Patrick only way Patrick, my son, can see her with a judge appointed chaperone.
Wow. Wow.
Isn't that?
That's a bit cruel.
You know, somehow, I don't want to cry on his shoulder, but as you probably listened to me now long enough, I had a lot of tragedy in my life. And I'm still here. And I'm still skiing and then whatever. Only thing is wrong with it, just like today, a lady came up, hi Joe, hug me. And I didn't want to say who you are. And then finally said, you remember I'm Susie. Yeah, oh yes, Susie. And I had no idea that she was Susie because I'm teaching people how to ski.
Yes, you mentioned that.
How the hell, you know, they remember me. But also I'm not very good with the, my memory is failing. Not failing, scrambling.
So can we go back to Whistler, because you know it's interesting to hear how you designed.
Yeah,
this
well,
experience.
what happened is that when eventually, too bad I don't have the pictures. I just sent them away. There is only one picture down there, so I'm skiing there. But the year after, that people who skiing on that picture in your room, as you go, it's me skiing down beside the avalanche slope. But that bowl was never touched when I got there 10 years before that picture was taken.
Right.
And so what happened is that when they decided first, the good mountain which I pointed out for them, which is now developed right now, was not the original one. The original was the slopes were broken. You know, they have a good slope and then flat,
Right.
and this and that. And I said, no, the good one is on the other side. Except when they built the first one, the gondola lift they had, there was a good summer camp
Right.
on the bowl, which I was teaching with Tony Seiler. You know who was Tony Seiler?
Yes, Austrian.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I was teaching.
So Olympic gold medalist, right?
Oh yeah, he won. Can you see? I used to win the races in Hungary, slalom, giant slalom, and slalom and downhill, and they called me Joe Sailor because the Cortina d'Ampezzo in '56.
Yes.
Yeah, and then many years after, him and I was teaching in summer camp
Wow.
in Whistler.
You're teaching summer camp for skiing or not?
Skiing,
Sure, some
skiing,
glacier, right?
skiing, yeah.
Right. So how many gondolas did you put there first in Whistler? How many chairlifts or gondolas?
In the beginning, there was a gondola. It went up to the 4,000 feet. And 4,000 feet, there was called a green, no, not green chair, just a chair, went up to roundhouse, they call it, which is elevation about 6,000 feet,
Right.
right? And then eventually, there were no construction company, nobody there, you know,
So
when
they had to cut the forest, right? Or they had to cut the
oh yes, they had to cut everything down. We had to hire the Seppo was the name of the Finnish logger, yeah, Seppo. And then, you know, I marked them out, but eventually we hired land surveyors as well.
Right.
Because although I know how to land survey, but that wasn't my job.
Right.
Land survey could sign his name on that
On the document.
document. I couldn't because I didn't have a land survey certification.
I see.
I had a certification in post.
So how much forest was cut for the ski slopes, or how long was the ski?
Well, the lumber removal of the lumber lasted 2 years.
I see. And then was it? They had to how did you flatten the ground so that all the tree stumps and all that?
Oh, they were big. First of all, they cut them very low. When they or they dug them out.
They dug them out.
When they could reach it with the backhoe.
Right.
but in the steeple hills they couldn't go up with the backhoe because,
So was it smooth enough for skiing or
well, you know, the problem is that not problem, when the snow comes in Whistler, in no time there is 6, 7, 8, 10 feet snow.
right?
And one of the problem is to, when you order the lift,
Right.
they wanted to know how high the towers or the cable will be.
Right. Otherwise you're gonna hit the snow, right?
All the time, yeah. So that was one of my jobs to cooperate with the Müller lift. We bought it from Switzerland. You know, the Müller engineer came back, and him and I, we, you know, made a profile drawing that this is the most, and we had snow survey
Right.
for 2-3 years before.
Right.
You know, I mentioned Stefan Pless. He lived there, and he did most of this that survey, which told him that what to measure. And then I used to go up there to from Squamish to Whistler. We used to Volkswagen sometimes 6 hours. Now you go up there in less than an hour. Because there was no road. Only the road had the power lines.
Right. So it was not paved, right?
No, nothing.
Right.
No road. There was a railroad.
There was a railroad.
Railroad.
Right. And then, so I assume you skied a lot in Whistler, right?
Oh yeah.
Ski a lot.
Oh, sure.
And then you went to.
I ran the first racing program up there, and then at one point they started the new downhills, even for kids, and then there is a ski area in eastern Canada. The name will come to me. I resigned as a coach because I didn't like the speed. By that time they reached 50, 60 miles per hour.
Right.
And I said, not the kids, it's just not right because the grooms at that time were not that good yet.
Right.
Now they have those piston bullies and all that. There was no such thing as piston bully there.
Right.
They're foot packed,
Right.
everything. And then,
You can get hurt at that speed.
oh yeah, and then if you hurt, you can really hurt, you know. And so there's one of the most Finning tractor, you know that name? Finning tractor chief engineer's daughter. Very good skier. She fell, she's quadriplegic for the rest of her life. So luckily I resigned as a coach a month before. And so but still today I feel a little bit responsible because I should have complained more, you know. But skiing can be a dangerous sport.
Right. So you ended up in Sun Valley, right? Years later.
Yes.
And did you also do teaching or coaching in Sun Valley? Or?
Well, what happened in Sun Valley is, again, another tragedy, is I sold everything in Canada. By that time, I had $600,000. Well, in 1983, $600,000 was a lot of money.
Right.
And then all cash. And then I got there on late Friday. The bank was closed. And then Saturday, Sunday, next morning, I took the money and then deposited $600,000, and it was missing 25%. Overnight, they devaluated the Canadian dollar by 25%.
Wow.
So I lost there 25% of 600. How much is that?
150,000.
150. At that time, a good lot, a nice lot along the river, was $50,000-$60,000. So I could have bought 2.5 lots,
Wow.
which are selling now millions of dollars.
In Ketchum, right?
In Ketchum, yeah.
So did you build something or did you buy something?
Well, eventually I bought a house, and a very nice place, actually, luckily. I bought it for $155,000 from a lady because the roof was leaking. but I fixed the, by that time I know how to fix things. And then when I sold that place, I sold that for $700,000. And that's the reason I bought that big property down at the bluff here.
So how many years did you spend in Sun Valley?
83, 82, 22 years.
So you raised your children there mostly, right?
Yeah. Oh, the children grew up over there.
Grew up there, right? And then what job did you have there?
Well, again, interestingly enough, there were a lot of condominiums, okay? And then every time when the problem was Whistler is a lot of sunshine, but sometimes it snows and freezes. And then they put a nice roof on, but when the snow melted because of the chimney or something around it, it went to the eaves and an ice dam developed.
Right.
And when the ice dam develops, the water, when it's water, cannot get through, gets underneath the shakes and eventually gets to the roof, And then the director of the condominiums by the Sun Valley Company his name was Louis Stur. I have a picture right in over there. And he's a Hungarian. And he said, Joe, what you doing? And I said, I have a construction company in Whistler. I'm an engineer here. I cannot practice engineering because it goes by state, by province by province. I could convert it, but it takes time and I'm not ready for it. And I came here to retire, but I lost that money and then I probably have to work. And then he says, well, what kind of work you do? He said, well, I do construction work. He said, do you know anything about roofing? And I said, sure I know, because in Whistler I learned that problem, and I developed the double roof system. What you do is put plywood on and then put tar paper, heavy one, 30 pounds practically, and then you put 2x4s on edge and then put another roof on top of it. So it's called the double roof system. So if the top roof, the upper roof, because the ice dam develops drips, it gets down to the lower roof. And then over there, it's already warmer because the heat comes up, okay, or whatever. So that way we have no more ice dams. And then I applied that in Canada, or I talked to them. I said, oh, do you want to do a job? And I said, look, you gave me one of these condominium jobs, and I do it, costs you no money. I pay for it, everything. If it leaks, I lost the money but if it doesn't leak, would you give me the whole work, hundreds of condominiums? He said, you got it right there. So finally, of course, I started to re-roof hundreds of condominiums in 2-3 months in the summertime for millions of dollars. At 15%, and my wage. So I suddenly started to make good money.
And you had workers, I assume, right?
Oh yes. And also Sun Valley is a redneck. You don't need a license.
Right.
But they need engineering.
Right.
That's
a lot of rich people move there, like Hollywood people, right?
It's the most coveted place in North America. Even Schwarzenegger.
Yes, I know.
What was did you listen to Schwarzenegger just recently?
No.
He talks about to Putin.
Oh no, I didn't. No, I will watch that.
You should watch it.
Okay.
Schwarzenegger. I didn't like Schwarzenegger very much because Schwarzenegger at one point became what's the name of the top of a state?
A governor.
a governor of California, you know, and then he did all kinds of good things, and then I was a little bit upset because many of the smaller sport people, including my son Patrick and others, he never really supported them. You know, he was a little bit more for Schwarzenegger, kind of deal. And then, anyway, but I was very much impressed with him recently about talking.
I will watch that, right.
Well,
so then you worked for 20 years, you worked in Sun Valley, or how many years did you work there?
22 years, well, 20 years, because in the last 2 years I didn't work anymore because I made enough money, and I became 70 years old.
I see.
And then what happened is that when I became 70 years old, I would have still worked, I had a crew and everything, but my insurance tripled. And I said, I never collected insurance. Oh yeah, but you making a job, $1 million or whatever. If anything goes wrong, there will be a lot of insurance obligation.
So now you're like 90 now. How old are you now?
I will be 91 in another 2 weeks.
I wish you, many more years to come. Many more ski trips for you.
Well, this year I skied. I put my skis on and tried to ski properly. Particularly my left ankle doesn't work too well.
So Joe, can you maybe, I don't know if people who will watch this video realize, but windsurfing is a very tough sport, right? In the gorge where we are right now, in the Columbia River Gorge, it can get very windy, sometimes 40, 45, 50-mile gusts. And you're still windsurfing at 890, right?
Yeah, I did.
So can you tell us about, what keeps you going, how you take care of your body, your muscles, your flexibility, to still be able to do that kind of sport?
Well, I was in my country, physical education in high school particularly was very important. As a matter of fact, in the tableau over there, one of the teachers over there is a phys teacher. And then he said when we became 8 years old in the gymnasium, they put a barrel of wine on the top of the cathedral, and they were drinking per two, you understand, with the teachers and students became per two, because you are a gentleman now, kind of a deal. And he said,
that means you don't have to talk to them in a formal language.
Yeah, and then and then he said, look, I taught you guys calisthenics, do it all your life until you live, and then until very recently I did it every morning.
So
The legs, turning over, and then stretching, etc., etc. It takes about half an hour. 40 minutes is more reliable figure, and you have to do it religiously. Also, eat what you eat, but don't eat too much. According to Pavlov, you know who was Pavlov?
Yes, the scientist, right, who did the dog experiment.
Yes, and you know what happened to those dogs?
I don't know.
Well, what happened is that Pavlov found out that the dogs, because Hitler said, not Hitler, but Stalin said, he said, look, I saw these German soldiers, they had decent food, and then my soldiers, they eat nothing but barley. Is find out what is a good nutritious food, and then we gave the proper menu to our soldiers. So Pavlov started to experiment with the dogs. He used very nutritious food, whatever, and he found out that when the dogs got very nutritious food, but the dogs didn't like it,
Yes.
they lost fur and got limp and etc. And when the dogs given very little nutrition, but the dogs love it because that's what they used to eat before or whatever. They were jumping and this and that, maybe lost weight, but they were very friendly. So then I say, eat what you want, but don't eat too much, because you have to, if you don't have saliva in your mouth, don't eat it. So it has to
feel good.
Yeah.
Right. But that's a good one. How about like injuries or muscles or joints? I mean, windsurfing in the gorge is tough. So how do you keep your joints healthy or your muscles?
That's what I did. I windsurf. I mean, I cross-country ski every year, every day, whenever I could. And the cross-country skiing to me, after downhill skiing is not very body. It's almost unhealthy sport because you freeze on the chairlift, get up there, and you start to go down. So you never warm up. Cross-country skiing, you always warm up even if you don't in the beginning, because every part of your body is moving.
So you think cross-country skiing is healthy, right?
Yes.
Right.
I guarantee if you reach your age, is particularly the time when you have to use cross-country skiing 80% of the time and 20% downhill if it's still like downhill. But eventually the downhill will hurt your knees, if whatever. But the cross-country skiing, I'm 90 years old, and then I skied 3 hours today, no problem, slowly.
Good for you. How about windsurfing?
Well, windsurfing, I used to go windsurf, and then what happened 2 years ago, I almost drowned. I made a jive and lost the jive, and my board got away from me. And tumbled in the water, came up again, and kept going. So I was swimming to get it. And after about 5-10 minutes swimming, I said, Joe, it's not going to work. You're going to drown. And then I slowed down, and then right away people sailing by me. He said, Joe, you're in trouble. He said, I'm not trouble, but get my board if you could. They couldn't because it's somewhere else. And there is a guy who always takes pictures with the boat. He just happened to come by. He picked me up and put me back to shore. And I got so embarrassed and scared that you can blow it up yourself, but if you can't do it for any reason, you can grab the string here, pull it, and automatically.
Right. Just like in airplanes, right?
Yes. And then I put this thing on and tried to windsurf. You know what happened? I was floating in the water like this and couldn't do anything. And I was safe in the water, but I couldn't.
Because the water start properly?
No, because I couldn't get in this position. Right? So $250 for nothing. Well, I don't know exactly what to say and how to say it, but if you want to get some personal experience which helped me to reach that age, is please first of all, try to forget about ice cream, forget about sugar. Sugar is the worst poison human body ever was accused by. Anyway, try to stay away from alcohol if you can. A glass of wine occasionally for dinner, probably even beneficial if you are older. And be religious about your physical exercise. And whatever is that, the best exercise is walking if you cannot do anything else. I used to run when I had a compound fracture falling into the river with my tractor in the ice floes. I don't know why I'm here. And I couldn't walk for months and months. And I started to run. And I run 75 miles a week. And that was overdone. But at least here I am now. I can still ski for hours because I went to the limit of my physical needs, not ability, the needs. If I did not do my exercises, I didn't feel healthy, didn't feel happy. And maybe doing proper exercise, maybe there is some chemical compound in your body pleases you. And when you do your exercise regularly, that nice feeling is demanding you to do the exercise. Right. Help to do it. Right. I don't know if I expressed it very clearly. And
how about like relationships, you know, marriage or children, raising children, any words? Tehát házasságról, meg gyereknevelésről valami.
I was szerencsés with my children because they were born in Whistler Mountain, and then without exaggeration, at age 3, every one of them could ski at the iciest, steepest slopes without poles. I never taught them how to ski. They learned on their own watching the good skiers. And one thing, because my son even today, who is now 52, 53 years old, he said, Dad, we had the best childhood anybody can have, because we have a farm. When we could ride the horses, we could swim the river, we live with nature, and then a city boy doesn't even understand what a boy who's brought up an open farm in the wild can do. And then you encouraged us to just be outside as long as you can. And then if I can explain this thing a little bit better, is my son at age 9, 10 years old used to play with the Indian children who were adjacent to our property. There was a tribe, no, in Pemberton, north of Whistler.
Okay.
And then there were 10, 15 Indian boys of that age with horses, no
saddles.
No, nothing. They were into the big river, swam across, and then disappeared in the marshes. I didn't know where they were. And then just before dinner time, they were coming back.
On horseback?
Horseback. And then they were yelling, "Hi, Badrick! Badrick! Badrick!" Well, it was Patrick became a horse rider from the very beginning, right away. I was very lucky with my children. Every one of them were athletically, particularly skiing. They learned early. They were very good mountain bikers. And then Patrick became world champions of the American Gladiators.
You mentioned that, yes.
And then Kim became world champion of ice climbing, and she was crowned in a Russian city only 25 miles when my father was in the Gulag
Wow.
for 5 years.
Wow.
You know.
What
and
The circle of life.
yeah. So and she wasn't even aware of it. But when she came home with the Russian presents, you know, the silk gown or whatever, and then when she was, and we looked it up in the that's Iris Kubishev. Oh, yeah.
All right, Joe. Well, you touched a lot of lives, right? And you had a very rich life. And thank you for sharing this with us. And I wish you, many more years, of health and
Well, thank you.
activities. And I know that when I go windsurfing, everybody knows you. Everybody wants to talk to you down at the river. So
Well,
you're touching many lives.
I also, I'm a lucky person because I have a vibration in my system. If I meet somebody, it gives me either positive or negative vibration. And if it's negative, I just don't bother, don't try to even wonder why is the negative. That's the way it is. But I've the most of the time in my life, I always get positive vibration right away, and I just like people,
Right.
and they like me as well.
It's mutual. Go both ways.
Yeah,
Well, Joe, thank you very much.
you are
Thank you.
welcome. I'm sorry that I couldn't get more comprehensive dissertation to you, but that's what I am.
You do give me permission to upload this to the YouTube, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you.